Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen on air or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, or our own WHPC app. Also, we constantly are bringing you from Herbally Yours the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have as our guest, Sara-Chana Silverstein. And Sara is a master homeopath and herbalist and runs a pediatric and women's clinic in Brooklyn, where she specializes in children's and women's health. Her book, Moodtopia, helps you tame your moods, de-stress, and find balance using healing herbs and aromatherapy. On today's show, we're going to discuss a specific topic about why knowing your blood type can be helpful to maintain good health. And you can always find Sara at Sara-Chana.com, which is Sarachana. So thank you so much for joining us today, Sara.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm a big fan. I love your classes. I love your radio shows, and I love your outlook on herbal medicine. So thanks for having me today.
So let's go back in time and discuss a little bit about what led you to enjoy and share for yourself and others natural healing.
Well, I went back to school after university and I became an IBC-LC, an international board certified lactation consultant. And I was sitting there in hospitals and clinics and helping women breastfeed and do postpartum care. And anytime a woman had a problem, they ran quickly to either an antibiotic or a steroid. Now, I want to preface this by saying these drugs are very helpful in many conditions, but I felt that women were having babies and breastfeeding for over 5,000 years of recorded history, and midwives had to have had other tools. So I started researching botanical plant-based medicine, and I realized that there were healing modalities in the herbal world that could help all these postpartum moms and newborn babies. So I started integrating them into my practice. I would always say, if you break a leg, go get an x-ray, go get a cast. If you're really concerned, go get an MRI or a CAT scan. So I was never against conventional medicine, but I really felt that almost 99% of women and babies' challenges could be helped and or healed with botanical medicine. And I would see it right before my eyes, Ellen. I would see breast infections going away. I would see babies with chronic stuffy noses get better. So I really saw that integrating plant-based medicine with newborn and postpartum care really worked and was beneficial.
And in addition to plant medicine, such as herbalism, you also are interested in homeopathics. What are your feelings about them?
So I did a 5-year classical homeopathic program, and it's like going to medical school, Ellen. I mean, we do anatomy and physiology. We do disease process. At the time that I was learning, there were over 3,500 homeopathic remedies. We did clinical hours. I mean, people in the U.S. don't understand the training that homeopaths have. So when I'm looking at a client that comes to me, Ellen, I am always looking to see if there's a homeopathic remedy that fits the symptoms. If I don't find that, I'll jump right to botanical herbal medicine. Some of my clients walk out with some homeopathic remedies and herbs, and sometimes I feel that the patient will be able to heal better and or be more compliant just with herbal medicine. So since we know, Ellen, especially in your practice, that everybody's an individual and we're treating the person, not the condition, I have to see what the person can handle, what they can integrate into their lives. So I use a combination of both.
And of course, also lifestyle recommendations like you talk about in Moodtopia. But let me just throw out a little political hook here, because perhaps you're aware, Sara, that the FDA has actually just deemed homeopathy illegal. And they plan to remove the availability of many, if not all, homeopathic remedies. So I don't know if you're familiar with that or, what your feelings about that are.
Well, I do guest lecture at medical schools on breastfeeding, and I'm a keynote speaker at medical conferences. And when people say to me, Sara-Chana, we look at a homeopathic remedy under a microscope and we can't see anything. And I'm like, well, you haven't developed the microscopes yet to be able to see what's going on. So generally in America, homeopathy is energy medicine. Energy is a really hard thing to understand. It's a really hard thing to visualize and see. And American doctors like to be able to see things and not just feel things. But we know, Ellen, that we walk into a room, we either like the energy of the room or we dislike it. We meet a person, we either like their energy or we don't like their energy. So energy is very much a part of our lives. But the question is, can you grab it in a test tube and test it in a lab? And the answer is no. And that's what I think people are struggling with in the U.S.
Right. But even so, it has such, a wonderful history of long-term use with a great degree of safety. Just about no adverse effects. There are a few minor ones. To take this away from the American public, I am strongly against, and am working very hard against allowing that to happen, because I think it's just incredibly horrible to take away something that is so inexpensive, such a wonderful healing tool, for no reason other than sometimes people might use it instead of a pharmaceutical, which interferes with pharmaceutical profits. That's really the only reason that they have.
Right. It's very funny because there was a male breast surgeon in Midtown Manhattan. I'm located in Brooklyn. And we met through a couple different of his patients. And he got to a point where he would say to his clients, look, I've seen so much success with breast abscesses and other problems with the breast. There's this little lady in Brooklyn, Sara-Chana. I've met her a couple times. I have no idea exactly what she does, but I suggest that before we do a surgical procedure on your breast, you go and see if this breast abscess could be resolved naturally. And I have to tell you, Ellen, that about 9 out of 10 times these breast abscesses would get resolved. So he had no idea what it was. I mean, he's a medical doctor, but he saw the results. So what happens is when people don't understand things, they get very fearful of it. Whereas if any doctor ever calls me and asks me to explain, I'm there to help them. So I deal with a lot of kids that have chronic fluid in their ears or swollen adenoids, and they're going to either get tubes in their ears and or tonsils and adenoids removed. And I always say to the parents, if you would like, let's try this protocol for 3 months. And I have to tell you, I don't know if my success rate's 100%, but it's probably around 98% of these kids don't need these surgical procedures. So a lot of doctors are slowly but surely seeing that it works, but it's still intimidated to them because they didn't do the 5-year homeopathic program like I did. And then I did a 3-year herbal apprentice program. And then I did clinical hours as an herbalist. So they don't even understand that this knowledge is available to them, Ellen.
That's true. Well, let's talk about a focus that we wanted to visit today, and that is finding out what your blood type is, because I think I saw that you were discussing that topic maybe on Facebook. And I said, that would be a really interesting topic to share with our listeners. So what is blood type and why does it matter?
So, it's so interesting because in my training as an herbalist and a homeopath and a lactation consultant, nobody ever discussed blood typing. So I had a woman that came to me once, Ellen, and she had this colicky, screaming baby that was miserable. And she comes to me and says, I won't do herbs. I won't do homeopathy. I won't do the medicine that the doctor is offering to me. Help fix me. And I'm sitting there, Ellen, I was kind of young and dumb. I was like, oh my gosh, what can I do? So I watched the baby nurse and I had some suggestions, and I had just read a book on blood typing and how it affects our bodies. And we know that breast milk is basically the components of blood. So, and in China, Korea, and Japan, blood typing is very important. All doctors know what blood type you are before they begin to treat you and come up with any protocol. So I looked at this woman and I said, look, I don't know much about it, but let me put you on the blood type food plan. Let's give it 6 weeks and see what happens. Ellen, within a week and a half, the baby stopped crying. And by 2.5 weeks, the baby was a calm, happy baby. And I was crossing my arms, Ellen, going, really? Is this true? And I have seen for the past 30 years that when my clients choose their food according to their blood type, the herbs work better, the homeopathy works better, they feel better in the world because O's are very different than B's.
Wait a minute. We have to back up, Sarah. We don't even know what you're talking about when you're talking about O's and B's.
Oh, okay.
Let's go back a little bit about what is a blood type and how would someone find out what their blood type is?
Great. So there's 4 blood types in the world today. Thank you, Ellen. There's O, A, B, and AB. The most common blood type in the world is blood type O. The next most common is blood type A. The third common and more rare is blood type B, and less than 10% of the world is blood type AB. Now, this was discovered and written down by a Dr. Landsteiner, who everybody can look up. I believe he was doing the work between 1935 and 1940. Don't quote me. I don't have my notes in front of me. But it was in the 1930s that he discovered under a microscope the different blood types. Because what was happening was between World War I and World War II, we'd have these big soldiers that would be strong, buff, in shape. Then they'd get either a knife wound or a gunshot wound and they would bleed out. And doctors knew we've got to do something called blood transfusions. And what they would do is they would actually take a healthy soldier and take a bloodline into take the unhealthy soldier, and they would take a tube and attach it to the healthy soldier, give the unhealthy soldier blood from the healthy soldier, and all the unhealthy people would get better within 24 hours. 50% Ellen died and 50% lived, and nobody knew why. So we knew in the medical world that blood transfusions were important, but we didn't know there were different blood types. So Dr. Landsteiner, under a microscope, found the first 3 blood types. That was A, O, and B. And in the world of medicine, they started giving O's O blood type, A's A blood type, A blood, and B blood. And they found that as long as they could understand the wound and where the wound was, that people were surviving from blood transfusions. So blood transfusion in Western conventional medicine became a phenomenon around the world. It was only many years later that they discovered that blood type O is called a universal donor. So blood type O's can give blood to A, B, and AB. But here's the thing. Even though our Western doctors do not believe that blood typing is a thing or part of health, Ellen, if you give a blood type A, blood type B blood, they're going to die within 24 hours. So I, through all my research, have discovered and understood that if there's such a difference between blood type A, O, B, and AB, they also get different diseases and different healing. I want to make one more point, Ellen. So, the most common disease in the U.S. is, and the statistics change all the time, but it tends to be diabetes. Blood type O's are the most common blood type, and blood type O's have more of a propensity towards diabetes. Blood type A's have more of a propensity towards cardiovascular, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. And the second most common disease in the U.S. at my last research is high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So when you start understanding blood typing, you will see that certain blood types are more prone to certain diseases than other blood types.
Well, how would someone find out what blood type they had?
Well, you can go to your doctor, and most doctors will kind of roll their eyes a little bit and say, well, it doesn't really matter. And you can buy online for $7 a home blood testing kit, and they're extraordinarily accurate. And if someone is not intimidated by giving their finger a little prick, it's very clear directions, and everybody for $7 can find out their blood type.
It's true. Or even truthfully, nowadays in the United States, anyone can get any laboratory test they want by just walking into a laboratory. But it probably would be more expensive if they just walked in and said, I want a blood typing. But truthfully, I have heard most people say it's $25 or $30, something like that. And then they have the report. It's a really important thing to find out. Now, you are a specialist, and I know in pregnancy, they often do blood type testing because there are certain combinations where if the mother is one blood type, but the baby is another blood type, there may be sort of an autoimmune component that happens. So they do want to know that.
Yes. Anybody that's given birth within the last 5 years can call their OB, and right in their chart, it says what their blood type is. Right. I want to tell you that in certain times in Russia around World War II, once the blood typing was discovered, just to let you know, it was mandatory to tattoo the blood type onto the body, the torso of the soldiers. They didn't tattoo it onto their arms or legs, Ellen, because God forbid during a war, their arms or legs could be blown off. But they needed that because if they had a wounded soldier, it was so imperative to give the person the correct blood type. So it's very important. And I agree with you. I feel everybody should know their blood type.
Well, I just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can always listen live online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio or anywhere else where you're getting your podcasts. And today, our guest is Sara-Chana Silverstein, and you can find her at Sara-Chana.com. It's a beautiful website, by the way, with lots of information. And Sara said that she'll actually be posting a little booklet about blood type. Is that what you said was going to be there, Sara?
Yes. So under my website, Sara-Chana.com, which you so graciously gave your listeners, there's a place in the upper bar that says free handouts. And just for your guests, I made up a flyer that they can print and put on their desk or on their refrigerator just to give them a little bit of insight into the 4 different blood types.
That is so helpful. This might really be new information for people. Of course, there certainly have been discussions. There's some great books like Eat Right for Your Type. And this concept has been around for a while, but I would say more in the natural medicine field than in conventional medicine. Now, like you talked about the different blood types, what would different foods or herbs that some are better for some blood types and some for others?
So I want to say that I was talking about quickly for a moment that blood type O's tend to be always in a kind of pre-diabetic state. Ellen, because I have a postpartum clinic, I can tell you that I have a lot of young girls that are in my office, skinny, eating what they feel is correct. And by their second baby, they don't pass their blood sugar levels. So blood type O should always be looking at how to keep their blood sugar balanced. For blood type O's, they need a very high protein diet. 3 eggs for breakfast, salmon for lunch, chicken for dinner. The more protein, including like hummus or tahina, anything that's a protein and some nuts are going to do better for blood type O's. Blood type A's have to worry about cardiovascular. They also tend to get more arthritis and gout. So the nightshade vegetables are not great for blood type A's. Now, you can eat for your blood type and, of course, cheat sometimes, Ellen. Like I always tell my clients, like, you don't have to be perfect. You can go out to dinner and have a blast. But for blood type A's, they don't do well with tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, cabbage, peppers, because they tend to go into the joint inflammation. Blood type Bs get a lot of growths. They can get fibrocystic breasts. They can get growths on their on their uterus or their ovaries, and men can get a swollen prostate. And they actually don't do well with foods like chicken, soy, and believe it or not, avocado. And ABs, according to the literature, and everybody can look this up, have more of a propensity towards blood clots. Clinical studies have shown that AB statistically are at a higher rate for strokes, and they do better with a more vegetarian vegan diet. They do better with beans, nuts, grains, vegetables, and fruits. So that's a very quick synopsis of the different blood types.
I know that when we suggested that to clients even years ago, it wasn't 100%, but a very high percentage of people just did so much better. It did not cost more. It was just a different focus when you're shopping, pretty easy because it's not really limiting your food choices. Within that class, there are many. But let's say some people, especially I may shout out one Italian person I'm thinking of, and when we told them not to eat tomatoes and eggplants and green peppers, all of which are in the nightshade family, there was a big riot there. But she did decide to try it anyway. And she felt so amazingly better.
Yeah. I mean, even conventional doctors now, if you come in with different arthritic conditions or any gout, the first thing even Western doctors are going to say is go off the nightshades. All the nightshade vegetables have a little bit of poison in them. They're not poisonous for humans, but they have a little poison in them. And a personality note about blood type A's is they don't do well with poisonous people. You know, Ellen, people that say one thing and do another, it really gets under their skin. A's really get affected by people that are not always telling the truth. Whereas O's, as a general rule, tend to say, oh, he's just an idiot. What does it have to do with me? So A's don't do well with poisonous foods and poisonous people.
You know, I never heard that personality link, like the fact that different blood types have different personalities. That's really interesting. You didn't write a book about this yet, did you?
Well, I did. I'm actually in the middle of finishing up my book, Moodtopia for Kids. And it's going to be a guide. Moodtopia, my original book, is for everybody. Men, women, children, adults, perimenopause, postmenopause. But Moodtopia for Kids is for parents who are struggling with kids that tend to be more moody. And I find with kids that when we put them on the blood type diet, they do so much better. And emotionally, blood type O's, as a rule, tend to have a lot of energy and get exhausted very quickly. Because they have trouble keeping their blood sugar levels stable, they can get exhausted, whereas blood type A's and ABs can live on nervous energy. So I have this one story of this little boy, and it's a true story, Ellen, and he was fabulous in school, but he was a monster at home. So the parents were talking to the doctor about putting this little kid on Ritalin because he was just a terror around the house. He was terrorizing the other children. So it turned out that I realized I took his blood and we saw that he was a blood type O. And he was having a lot of dairy and a lot of starches, which tends not to be great for blood type O. So he's waking up, having a quick bowl of cereal and milk. And at school, they'd give him a piece of bread and orange juice. For lunch, they'd have like mac and cheese and then a cookie on the way out. So what happened was when the mother used to pick him up from school, when he was away from the school, he was a monster, hitting his sister, yelling at his mom. It was a disaster. So I told the mother to get a little thing of chicken nuggets and meet him at school and give him the chicken nuggets. The first day he threw it at his mother. The second day at his sister. The mother called me up and said, I've been doing this for a week, Sara-Chana. He won't take a bite. I'm throwing away money. I said, just wait. Finally, he ate one chicken nugget, then another chicken nugget. He got home and his mother gave him some chicken soup. For dinner, he had some meatballs. And you know what, Ellen? This kid didn't need to go on Ritalin. He just needed a higher protein diet. He just needed to make sure his blood sugar levels were stable. She ended up giving him 2 eggs for breakfast instead of the cereal and milk. She spoke to the school about how he didn't do well with just starches and dairy. And this kid did not need Ritalin. I mean, what's a better story than that? Ellen, he didn't even need herbs or homeopathy. He just needed to keep his blood sugar levels stable. So he faked it at school, Ellen. He was a good kid. He faked it at school. But once he was away from there, he just let it roll, and it was not a pretty scene. So I've seen this with lots of kids and adults over the past 30 years, Ellen.
Isn't it wonderful when there's that kind of turnaround, and so much better to stay off Ritalin, and it actually was a long-term solution instead of just sort of a Band-Aid covering the issue.
And
now, what about herbs? You mentioned that perhaps we talked a little bit about foods. Are there certain herbs that are better for one blood type or another?
Well, it's very interesting because echinacea is not bad for blood type O's, but blood type O's tend not to feel the effect and get the results. It's funny. One of my teachers, and I'm not going to mention her name, but I'd love to, when we were learning about the herb, she said, I know echinacea, is a fabulous herb. And I know it's an immunomodulator, but I never really felt it worked when I took it. And I went up to her after class, Ellen, and I said, "Are you a blood type O?" She said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, "Because when blood type O's take echinacea, they don't get the same results as blood type A's, B's, and ABs. So when I'm making an immune mix for a blood type O, I'll just put in other herbs as opposed to echinacea." So that's a perfect example. And blood type O's don't do as well with shepherd's purse. So if I have a client that's having postpartum staining, or if someone, has some issues, I'll tend to give them yarrow, Ellen, as opposed to shepherd's purse.
Well, that's really, really fascinating. That I never heard before. And so I love doing these radio shows since 1987, actually, that I've been doing them, because there's something new to learn every day. Well, just remind our listeners how they could find out more and how they could find you, Sara.
Thank you, Ellen. So it's Sara-Chana.com. That's SARACHANA.com. And in the upper bar, you're going to see free handouts, and go there and you're going to find the free handout on blood typing and children's health and women's health and other little free handouts you can print out and put on your refrigerator. And if anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, I, a couple times a week, put up 1 little minute videos on different herbs. That's Instagram. That's Sara-Chana, SARACHANAS, and they can be introduced to the plant world like your fabulous Instagram page, which I enjoy so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for joining us once again as we bring you Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.